there. Gary Parrish, welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, CBS Sports Network, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting, dodo birds, and leaky black. Matt Norlander is here with me, and we're both going to be here with you for the next hour discussing the 2025 NCAA tournament, which, of course, gets underway tonight with the first four in Dayton. Alabama State, St. Francis, Pennsylvania. That's going to be the first game. The winner advances to be a $1 million-point underdog, against Auburn. After that, it's going to be North Carolina against San Diego State, provided the Tar Heels make it to the arena on time because travel issues. That was the big headline on Monday. Update us, Norlander. What time did Hubert Davis and his Quadrant 1 Challenge basketball team actually make it to Ohio?
Well, I actually can give you the timestamp. This is becoming an annual thing, Parrish. There's a plane issue with the tournament every year. UConn couldn't get to the Final Four on time last year. It was like 3 years ago. Colorado State couldn't get a plane. The exact time of touchdown, I actually have it. I truly do have it from the staff here. I got to scroll back here. I want to give you the exact accurate reporting on the podcast and CBS Sports Network. It was, oh my gosh, there's so many texts. Here it goes. It was at 6:42. 6:42, they landed in Dayton. And then they went right to media. Then they practiced. Carolina, listen, maybe they're going to roll and win this thing by 27 points and just really rub everyone's face in after what happened there. But they're on the ground, good to go. And it is a quick turnaround, by the way. I mean, they've had a few days since they've played, but they don't find out if they're in the tournament or not till Sunday. And then, if you get that first four game, you're off and on the road and in the air, ideally early on Monday. But yeah, they had to wait, a number of hours before they actually got on the ground in Ohio.
And the jokes were everywhere on social media. Our buddy Stuart Mandel might have won the night with the comment, the plane must have run into a Quadrant 1 opponent, obviously in reference to what was one of the big storylines on Selection Sunday, North Carolina getting an at-large bid despite having a 1-12 record in Quadrant 1. I also saw out there a plane don't lie. Obvious ball don't lie reference, obvious ball don't lie situation. Ball don't lie. That wasn't a foul. Ball don't lie. You get that in basketball all the time. Here, North Carolina doesn't belong in the tournament, but they're in. Okay, but we won't let their plane get them there at a reasonable time. So interesting night. And it does seem like it's become a pretty common thing. Like somebody's always having travel issues on the there now. And all the teams are there now. And we're going to have two basketball games tonight. Obviously, Hubert Davis kind of a magical run through the got there as a number 8 seed all the way to the national championship game. Do you see a scenario where you could see North Carolina having another improbable run throughout this bracket?
By that, do you mean like maybe not even Final Four, but just Elite 8? Because I'd say no, but I will tell you this. List you off some teams. Go ahead, GP.
How hard do you have to think for you to imagine North Carolina in the Sweet 16?
That's not unthinkable. It's possible. I'll name you off some teams right now. Creighton, Mississippi State, Georgia, Oregon. It's a 5 seed, by the way. Arkansas, New Mexico. These are all teams that if you take the predictive metrics and the net rankings and you average them out, all those teams I just gave you, some of those are teams that have single-digit seeds. They all rank behind North Carolina in predictive metrics. UNC is a, 32nd, 33rd best, somewhere in that range, team in a 68-team field. So it's about halfway in quality. It's not inconceivable that UNC could win on Tuesday and win its first-round game. That's absolutely on the table, even with its lack of high-end wins. And here we are in the tournament, and Hubert Davis has actually found some magic before. So I do put it within the realm of possibility. This is an intriguing game. I was in studio Monday night with Wally Zerbiak, Chris Walker, and Brent Stover, as you've done many, many times before. And Wally was saying that he's never looked forward to a first 4 game ever more than UNC versus San Diego State, because he wants to see what kind of Carolina team shows up. Are they ready to go? Are they going to make a huge statement, or will they show up flat against a San Diego State team that is, really, really a quality team defensively? And he brought up the fact that, UNC and San Diego State. These are two schools that have been in the national title game in like the past 3 years. So there's a lot surrounding this one. What are your thoughts, and how much confidence do you have that the Tar Heels will reverse course, at least immediately, if not being yet another team, as we get almost every year, to go from the first four into at least the second round of the tourney?
Well, once we have a bracket and it's a single elimination tournament, all the quadrant stuff kind of goes away. Like, it doesn't really matter anymore. Whatever you were, you're now here, and the path to whatever you're trying to do is right in front of you. We don't need to talk about resumes anymore. But I do think it's just interesting to take a look at this, given that North Carolina is the most controversial team in the field. And among the reasons is because it was 1-12 in quadrant one. The first thing I wanted to look at is San Diego State. Again, this stuff doesn't matter anymore, but would it qualify as a quadrant one game? Technically, no. San Diego State is 52nd in the net. Neutral court, you need to be top 50. Your opponent would need to be for it to be a quadrant one opportunity. So this is technically quadrant two. That's good news for North Carolina. Undefeated in quadrant two. They got emphasized a lot on Selection Sunday. But this is a comparable team to the types of teams North Carolina has lost to a lot this season. I'm going to pick them, I think, to win the game, but there's nothing I've seen from this team that makes me think they'll win another one. I could see them get to the round of 64, but I don't trust them to go past. I don't trust them to go past that.
You know, this will be an intriguing matchup here. San Diego State is not a team that offensively is ultra dynamic. Dutcher's done a good job over the years that he's had this gig, and they had the big run to the title game. Obviously, we know about all of that. It's not also a big team, and UNC obviously doesn't have a lot of size, so that can work in UNC's favor. Just a reminder, a reminder on SDSU. This is a team that did beat Houston this season. It did beat Creighton. You know, it's got some good heft on there. I think on the interior, Jared Coleman Jones is the guy really to watch because he is 6'10" and he can do some damage. But I wonder if Carolina is going to try and get up and down the floor as much as possible, and if it can do that, be good on the boards, pull out a win. RJ Davis got hot, a couple times down the stretch. He had some words at the press conference on Monday about, I'm gonna paraphrase him here, but he was basically saying, like, people get asking me, like, do we think we're a tournament team? Do we deserve it? He's like, this hurts my basketball soul. Like, of course, like, we think we're good enough to be here. We deserve to be here, and we're going to have a chance. And so, yeah, I'm excited to watch the game. I want to see what Carolina does here. And remember, it was a year ago. We were talking about an ACC team that was in the first four, and that was Virginia. And Virginia promptly did not serve itself well. It had 42 points in a loss against Colorado State, and that was a Virginia team that really stumbled down the stretch, that folks were saying probably didn't deserve to be in the field, and then it effectively proved those people right. Carolina's going to score a lot more than 42 tonight, but the ACC is going to hope to avoid back-to-back years in which controversial inclusions up in Dayton don't fall well short when the game gets played.
I do think the game is more interesting and we'll have more eyeballs on it because of the controversy connected to North Carolina's inclusion. Like, everybody thinks it should, or most people think it should have been West Virginia in, North Carolina out. In theory, this could have been West Virginia against San Diego State. That's way less compelling to the broad audience than North Carolina against San Diego State under these specific set of circumstances. So I can't wait. Should be fun stuff on True TV. Before we move on, meantime, over in West Virginia, they're still big mad about getting left out of this NCAA tournament. We touched on it yesterday. The governor held a press conference, alleged corruption. It had become a bigger story overnight into this morning. Is the selection process going to end up in front of the Supreme Court? Is that where we're headed with this thing?
Oh, man, I hope not.
I hope so.
I really hope not. Can we not have a situation where Jerry Palm needs to speak to Congress, or we head to the Supreme Court, GP? We don't need that. This was political grandstanding at its worst. It has prompted, and we talked about this on the show yesterday, so we don't need to do a redux here. It has prompted a lot of discussion, and I'm glad to see that it's getting more traction, because I've been saying this for a long time, about who comprises the selection committee? Should we diversify? Should it not be ADs? Bubba Cunningham stands to, in his contract, legitimately benefit off of North Carolina getting into the field and advancing in the field. And I get all that, but he's also on the selection committee. So there should be real conversations and real discussion had about who is on that committee. But no, I think your exact words were, is the selection process headed to the Supreme Court?
Yes,
anything's possible in this country in 2025. I really hope not. I mean, I truly hope I'm not. You know how the Supreme Court, they don't even let cameras and video in? Like, it's the one institution where it's like old school, like reporters that cover that beat. They literally, the photos, the videos, you see them when a decision has been decided, when a verdict has come down, they're literally sprinting across the plaza in Washington, D.C., running to file their stories and share the news. Don't let that be me in 3 years. I don't need to be sprinting out of the halls of the Supreme Court and letting you know what Judge Kavanaugh's final decision was when it came to deciding about what size the field is and who is selecting teams. I know you ask in jest, but it's insane that we're even here on a Tuesday in the middle of March talking about this.
I want Amy Comey Barrett to have to listen to testimony from Jerry Palm, and then I want us to do a live in-person Eye on College basketball podcast from the Supreme Court, all over the selection process being taken to the Supreme Court because the West Virginia governor is alleging corruption. As we said yesterday, it is not corruption. It is incompetence, perhaps. I'll go with incompetence, but it is not corruption that led to West Virginia being left out of this NCAA tournament. Probably just incompetence. But I do think this is a place and time to reevaluate exactly who should be on the selection committee and whether it should be athletic directors and other people like that. I mean, it is true. Bubba Cunningham is going to get a big direct deposit because North Carolina is in this field, and he would not have gotten that direct deposit if North Carolina wasn't in this field. And you can tell people as many times as you want to that you exit the room and there's no influence. But as we've talked about multiple times since this development materialized, influence exists whether you're in the room when the North Carolina discussion is happening or not. It just does among humans. And if it creates a perception of problematic things, that might be reason enough to take a new look at it. Beyond that, I say this respectfully, but there is no actual skill set any individual athletic director brings to the table that makes them a better so-called bracketologist than literally anybody else on the planet. Like, it's not like, well, the reason we have ADs on the committee is because they really know how to do this. You can teach anybody how to do this. You can, basically anybody, you could teach how to assemble a bracket, and you would get similar brackets to all the brackets we've ever gotten. I do think this is a point where that should be a conversation, and I hope that they have it. Let's move on. When we come back, we'll provide some injury updates for NCAA tournament teams. Got good news out of Alabama connected to Grant Nelson. Not so great news out of Memphis connected to Tyrese Hunter. What's the latest with Cooper Flagg? We'll run through all of it next. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to Eye on College Basketball Podcast on CBS Sports Network. Duke's Cooper Flagg is the biggest name who is entering this NCAA tournament with an injury, but he's not the only one. Grant Nelson at Alabama, Tyrese Hunter at Memphis, Juwan Roberts at Houston. We'll get to all of them in a second, but first, the latest on Cooper Flagg. Norlander, how's his ankle doing?
Seems to be progressing along nicely enough. We talked about this at length on the Monday bracket breakdown show on CBS Sports Network, and there was a good debate about should he even play in the first round. He may well want to. Maybe he'll be cleared. There's something to be said for actually getting game action, even if it is against a 16 seed in advance of playing what will be a true, like, all right, here we go, kind of second round matchup against an 8 or a 9 seed. But it's, we talked about this recently as well. You're a doctor, I'm not. We're not going to advise him specifically what to do, but it looks like it's trending in the right direction. My read on it is that Cooper Flagg is going to want to play in every single available NCAA tournament game that he can, provided he feels good on that ankle. So it wouldn't shock me whatsoever to see if he is starting when Duke plays on Friday night.
I am not his trainer, obviously, but what he wants would, I don't want to say not matter to me, because that's not exactly true, but it would be down the list of things that matter to me pretty far. My medical staff would talk to me about this. And if they said he's anything less than 100% or at any elevated risk of re-aggravating it in a round of 64 game on Friday, then we're not playing in the game. Like, this is Duke with multiple other projected first round picks. I know that we now live in a world where 16s have upset one seeds before. We didn't used to live in that world. We now do. But it's a wildly unlikely scenario. And frankly, if you can't trust that Duke roster to get past a 16 seed without Cooper Flagg, then you had bigger issues anyway. If he's 100% and just feels as perfectly as he's ever felt, by all means, playing around a 64, what do I care? But the most important thing is to have him as healthy as possible, as deep into this bracket as he can get. And if playing on Friday complicates that, or even possibly complicates that in any way, I personally would rather just see him for the first time in the round of 32. Let's go down to Alabama. Encouraging news, I think, out of Tuscaloosa. Nate Oates, the Alabama coach, said the imaging came back. Grant Nelson, it's positive, not as bad as it could have been. Not ideal. You don't even want to have these conversations this time of the year, but possibly he plays in the first round. They are aiming for, at worst, second round. If you're Nate Oates, you got a real big sigh of relief. They've already had injury issues this season. You wouldn't want to lose your second leading scorer for any extended period of time heading into an NCAA tournament. So this is good news out of Tuscaloosa, right?
It is. I checked in with Alabama on Monday, and as things stood when I did my check in there, and I know Nate also addressed the media, it sounds like they could be will be like okay, if we need to hold him out, let's hold him out, but should be able to get in for the second game. And then certainly there's no long-term doubt if Alabama can advance to the second weekend, Grant Nelson will be good to go. That's a key piece of news for the Tide, no doubt about it. Because I think, you're talking to a guy who's got Alabama going relatively far in the tournament, and I'm doing that under the understanding that Grant Nelson had a knee tweak, but he should be healthy. He's pivotal to Alabama's national title and maybe even Final Four hopes.
More good news down at Houston. Juwan Roberts, who missed multiple games in the Big 12 tournament with an ankle sprain, is reportedly good to go. We're expecting him to play in the round of 64, correct?
Yes, I checked in with Houston on Monday. I was told if Juwan Roberts suffered the injury that he has right now, if he had suffered that, say, in the Elite Eight, he would have been good to go for the next game. They held him out as a precaution. He is 100% playing, which is also good news.
And then at Memphis, not so great news. Nothing official from Penny Hardaway about Tyrese Hunter, who's a top 3 player on this roster, a guy who has played power conference basketball before, played in NCAA tournaments before. He has suffered a foot injury in the AAC tournament. He missed the AAC tournament title game. He was in a boot. He was on crutches. He did climb the ladder down in Texas to cut a piece of that net after the Tigers won the AAC tournament, but it wasn't an easy thing for him to do. Penny held his weekly radio show here in Memphis last night and said that they're not ready to make any sort of declaration about Tyrese Hunter one way or another, but I can just tell you everything I'm hearing suggests it's at least unlikely that he's going to play on Friday in the round of 64, and also unlikely that he plays again for Memphis in this NCAA tournament. We don't have to make any big declarations, but I'll just ask it to you this way. If Tyrese Hunter is on the court for Memphis in this NCAA tournament, would that be surprising to you at this point?
I think so. It doesn't sound like it's good. I would love for that not to be the case. I actually got a chance to interview and talk with Tyrese Hunter back when Memphis was in Maui, and it was an awesome interview. He also had a really great showing out there, and it is damaging. Now, PJ Haggerty could go for 40 against Colorado State. I get all that, but it's damaging not to have him. And he's a player that's, there's a few guys here that are just really fun players to watch, and not having them potentially at all, or at least for a number of games, it's going to put limitations on certain teams. Keyshawn Gilbert not going to play for the whole tournament for Iowa State. And there's actually been we had this a year ago with Kansas as well. Like, is he actually hurt enough? He had to go on social media and say, no, I actually am. Like, there's actual injury issues behind why I'm not playing. So there's that as well. Take it as you please, GP. But just two others that we didn't touch on. Malik Brown has a shoulder injury for Duke. He's not going to play, and his timeline to return is to be determined. And then Rain Smith has had an ankle injury as well at Louisville, but he is going to play, and that's obviously a biggie. We'll get to Louisville versus Creighton before the end of the show.
One of the things I've realized about the NBA playoffs, and not just me, but anybody who follows the NBA playoffs, is every year they are often like the results are dictated by injuries. It's an ankle over here, a shoulder over there, and important players throughout the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference just aren't available. And we're running into that a little bit with the NCAA tournament. Obviously, like 2 number 1 seeds are dealing with significant injury stuff. It sounds like it's going to be okay at both Duke and Houston, but 2 number 1 seeds losing top 3 players in their conference tournaments is never what any coach is hoping for. So hopefully at most of these places, everybody heals up as quickly as possible. But obviously at other places, specifically like Memphis, this might just be a what-if situation. Penny Hardaway trying to get the Tigers to the Sweet 16 for the first time in his career, for the first time since 2009. They weren't guaranteed to do that, obviously, even with Tyrese Hunter, but it would have been easier to try to navigate this bracket, particularly with a second-round possible matchup against Maryland, if you had all of your most important players available. And again, it looks like Memphis might not. When we come back, let's look at some interesting matchups that we either are guaranteed to see or might see early in the bracket. Among the obvious ones, we could have a second-round matchup between John Calipari at Arkansas and Rick Pitino at St. John's. That would obviously be fun. What are some more interesting matchups or possible matchups? Keep an eye on in the bracket. We're going to discuss that next. This is the Eye on College Basketball podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to Eye on College Basketball podcast, CBS Sports Network. Let's dive into the bracket, try to find some interesting storylines or possible storylines. In the second round, I think everybody has picked up on this one. We could get a classic John Calipari, Rick Pitino matchup in the second round of this NCAA tournament if Arkansas and St. John's both win their first round games. That would be fun. Sign me up. Norlander, I know you've identified some other interesting matchups or possible matchups in this bracket. Run me through your favorite ones if you got a second.
I will. Listen, I wanted to give us a little bit of an angle we haven't talked about yet, and this one's intriguing, and folks love to overreact, and I mean overreact, sometimes appropriately so, about like, oh, look what the committee was trying to do. I'm here to tell you that there are so many coaches that have so many relationships and so many schools that some of this stuff, no matter what combination of bracket you put together, it will be inevitable. That being said, in this beautiful, beautiful clean sheet here right now. Some of the stuff to look for. One's in the first round, and I'll be there on Thursday. Will Wade just happens to be coaching against his alma mater. The McNeese coach went to Clemson. You don't often get that in a first round matchup. As for stuff that's further down the road, Danny Wolf at Michigan, it's entirely conceivable that he would have to play his former team, Yale, in the second round. And I actually got to see Wolf at Yale. I live here in Connecticut, took my boys to a couple of Yale games over the past couple of years, and he was incredible there. So you have that. Something that I think a lot of fans might not know, Texas Tech coach Grant McCaslin and Drake coach Ben McCollum, they're in the same pod, and they are practically best friends. They might have to coach against each other in the second round of the West if Drake beats Missouri and Texas Tech beats UNCW. Not only are they good coaches, like their staffs know each other, so that's kind of super intriguing, and all the more reason why, if you're confident about either Texas Tech or Drake making the Sweet 16, why that might happen. Elsewhere in the bracket, Oregon, Arizona, I love the Pac-12 vibes. That's a potential second round Pac-12 throwback over there in the East. Duke and Arizona, if they met in the Sweet 16, one, we've seen that in a national title game, but also those are two teams in far off places. It will actually have been the third meeting in 2 seasons between those two, because Duke played at Arizona this year and Duke won. I was at that game. And then Arizona won at Cameron last season. They could meet in the Sweet 16. Eric Bossy, who does great stuff for us at 247 Sports and has an article up at tbsports.com, I believe today now, gets into Brad Underwood and Sean Miller. Those two are going to coach against each other in the first 4 on Wednesday night. And they could both wind up coaching against Texas. Sean Miller will for sure. Brad Underwood might. As I mentioned previously, Sean Miller was a rumored about candidate for the Texas job the last time it came open before Rodney Terry got it. Brad Underwood has huge Texas ties. I'm not saying Brad Underwood wants to leave one shade of orange for another, but if and when Texas were to open, it's conceivable that Texas might have to, or these two coaches might have to coach against Texas, and they both might wind up being candidates for the next opening. Just a couple other notes here. 4 teams that played in Maui, they're all in the South. I saw all these teams out in Paradise, GP. Auburn, North Carolina, Michigan State, Iowa State. They were all in Maui, and obviously a couple of those teams played against each other. They're all in the same region there, so a Maui flavor. And if Florida and UConn meet, if they meet in the second round, that will be the 2 most recent programs to win back-to-back national titles, and Florida will try and prevent UConn from besting it in UConn's, albeit long shot quest to have a three-peat. There's probably a couple more out there, but I don't know. Which one of those do you find to be the most interesting?
I just like the Will Wade Clemson thing. And you're exactly right. I used to put together brackets like, you going according to all the principles. This is the way it needs to go. And when that bracket comes out each selection Sunday, I think people grab it, look at it, and then find things that are interesting. And sometimes go, oh, that must have been intentional. Will Wade against his alma mater, that must have been intentional. And like you said, the truth is, there's almost no way to put together a 68-team bracket without finding stuff like this. We could go to 3 year ago bracket, 7 years ago bracket, just pull it, and we would be able to identify similar things. They're always there. I don't think they're ever intentional, or at least I think they're often just coincidental. But still, like the first time I ever met Will Wade, he was at Clemson. Like there was a time where Oliver Purnell's the head coach, and I believe on staff there, running around that campus, you had Shaka Smart, you had Will Wade, you had Mike Morrell, like all these guys who are head coaches now, just sort of young assistants running around the Clemson campus. That's where I first developed relationships with any of them. And so obviously Will, it sounds like, has big things in his future. He's probably going to be a power conference coach again sometime soon. But for now, he's still the head coach at McNeese, and he will, in the first round, be coaching against his alma mater. That's Clemson. And then, obviously, as this bracket unfolds, in certain parts, it will unfold the way we assume. In other places, not so much. And there will be other storylines that materialize that you can't even really identify right now because you think they're wildly improbable, but they'll be a reality. That's the way the bracket tends to go year after year after year. When we come back, going to turn our attention to a flashback segment presented by Travis Matthew. And with the first 4 tonight, what I want to do is take you back to the first 4 we ever had, back when VCU started a magical run to the Final Four with a memory over what was at the time a Pac-12 school. We're going to do that next. This is the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, CBS Sports Network. Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. Now it's time for the Flashback Segment, brought to you by Travis Matthew, apparel designed for confidence and comfort no matter where the day takes you. Today's Flashback Segment going to take us back to March 16th, 2011. First 4 in Dayton, first 4 for the first time. I was there. VCU got an at-large bid out of the CAA despite being outside of the top 80 at KenPom. And everybody was wondering, man, what is this Bubba Cunningham up to? I'm just kidding. Bubba Cunningham had nothing to do with it. Still, it was very controversial. Very controversial. Then VCU goes to the first 4. They beat USC in Dayton 59-46 to advance into the main bracket. Then they beat Georgetown, Purdue, Florida State, and Kansas to advance to the school's first Final Four. And they did it with a 33-year-old head coach, a guy named Shaka Smart. Norlander, what, if anything, do you remember about that team, about that run, about what was clearly Shaka's rise to stardom?
Great choice, GP, as we don our Travis Matthew apparel here. Very comfy.
Look, we look like real adults. Look at us. We look like adults today.
I know.
Like we kind of look like real people.
That?
Like if you saw us out in the wild, you know what people would say about us? They kind of look like they're dressing their age. They kind of look like it's nice to see them put something on other than a T-shirt. We look like real people.
Other than
today.
A band T-shirt, yeah. It's all good. I met Shaka Smart for the first time this season. This was the first year I worked at CBS. VCU beat UCLA at the Garden. Um, and I remember doing this is all like popular now, GP. We'll get to the first four running in the tournament run in a second. But I remember Shaka Smart. I asked the SID then. This was the first time I ever interviewed a coach with someone holding a phone after, and it was Shaka Smart. And I remember learning like he was a huge Bears fan, had Chicago ties. We talked about all that. Little did I know at that. I'm bringing up the schedule here. They had lost to Tennessee 2 nights before. This is the preseason NIT back then. They beat UCLA, and this team would go on not only to make the tournament. You want to flashback to a different era? 23-11 in the CAA and got an at-large bid. I mean,
Yes.
That is near unthinkable now in the modern era with conference realignment, but that's good stuff. And they were a controversial inclusion. I remember there was a lot said because VCU at one point it went from 18-5 to 23-11, so it really was tripping over its shoelaces down the stretch. Nevertheless, it gets in, beats USC, and the Kansas game is what I think most people remember because VCU went insane from 3-point range. That game was in the Alamo Dome. Oh, by the way, this year's Final Four will be there. And VCU hit 12 3-pointers on 25 attempts, about 28%. Meantime, Kansas went super cold, 2 of 21. That Bill Self team couldn't break on through. That was a Kansas team, oh, by the way, that featured the likes of the Morris twins, Tyshawn Taylor, Thomas Robinson, Brady Morningstar. Meantime, VCU set it's funny, GP, as I just talked with Shaka last week at the Garden, because we were talking about this team, his current team, not being a great 3-point shooting team. And he had mentioned that his VCU team in 2011, it was just okay, but it got aberrationally hot. And he was like, I don't know if anyone's ever broken that record. VCU made 53 threes on its way to the Final Four. That was a record at the time. I got to imagine that has actually since been beaten given how teams shoot, but maybe it actually hasn't. Regardless, I remember the 3-point barrage. I remember Joey Rodriguez and how awesome he was running the point. Jamie Skeen, Brad Burgess, who I think Burgess hit the shot against FSU in the Sweet 16. That was the overtime win, and the real moment was like, whoa, we might have something here. So VCU, like, they happened after George Mason, but they were the next mid-major that really, Mason kicked it off in 06, but after VCU, and Butler as well, I should correct that, but it was Mason, then Butler, and then VCU doing it again is like, we might have something here. And obviously since then we've had others, Loyola Chicago being notable, but that was a really, really fun team. Love those dudes. And Joey Rodriguez to me is like an all-time awesome vintage college basketball point guard. Ton of fun. Can't believe Shaka was only 33 when it happened.
Shouts to Javante Reddick. I remembered it this way, some of the stuff you just said, but I wanted to go back and confirm it last night, so I did. The 3-point shooting stuff is interesting the way you framed it. This is the way I remembered it. VCU played 34 games that season before the NCAA tournament and made double-digit threes in a game one time. 1 out of 34. They did it 4 times in the NCAA tournament. They just got crazy hot from 3 and literally started shooting the ball in a way from the perimeter that they had not shot it all season long and got to the Final Four. It became a huge story because it was VCU, like this little mid-major that maybe wasn't even supposed to be in the tournament, because it had the young head coach, Shaka. The name helped. All of a sudden, everybody just running around yelling, Shaka. Shaka went from somebody nobody knows to a one-name celebrity within a matter of weeks. Yeah. He went from a one-name.
He was diving on the floor during practice and shoot-arounds, like getting up, guarding his guys. Like it was a whole big thing. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
So here's what's funny. Shaka and I just told you, when I first met him, he was an assistant at Clemson. We were probably in our late 20s, early 30s the first time we met each other. And then he was an assistant at Florida. And like we're around the same age. I think I'm maybe 3 or 4 months older than him. It might not look that way. But I think I'm only about 3 or 4 months.
Man. Anyway, continue.
I think I'm only about 3 or 4 months older than him. So he would come into Memphis to recruit. And at the time, I was hosting like a Monday night football trivia thing at a local bar. And so one Monday he was in town recruiting. He was like, hey, what are you up to? And I was like, I've got to host this thing, but you're welcome to come by. And so he like comes to the Monday night football trivia thing. All right. And I introduce him to my friends and we're just having a good time. We hang out all night long. All right. And I swear to God, this was so funny. It's like fast forward 2 years later or 3 years later. VCU's on this run. And I get like text messages from my friends, and they're like, GP, this VCU thing is crazy. This guy Shaka's amazing. And I'm like, you don't even remember, but you sat and had quesadillas with him during Monday Night Football 2 years ago. You don't even remember who you were with, but it's the same guy you're now blown away by. It really went from nothing
That's
to
good stuff.
everything very quickly. And he's obviously been a big name in the sport ever since. So I don't remember why I was at the first four, other than I think it was just the first one, and we wanted somebody there. And yeah, I think that must have been it.
This is
there.
Vintage Parish, by the way. I absolutely remember. That was my first season writing for CBS. They had never had Dayton in the first four period. It was a big, intriguing thing. And yeah, you wanted to, I'm telling you why you went. You don't even remember. You wanted to go, you wanted to cover it, you wanted to see what this was going to mean, were these teams going to be terrible? We needed someone there. This is also back in the day. We sent a writer to every single site, no matter what. And so you did that. I went off to Denver the next week, and that site was littered with upsets. Denver is now hosting a first round pod this week tournament as well.
I want to think there was a pod.
This is a fun flashback, GP. Just thinking about that 2010, 2011
sort of remembering
season
it.
Run. Obviously, Butler making the title game. UConn won it all that year. Pretty cool season. Pretty cool tournament for college hoops.
I'm just sort of remembering it in real time. I think there might have been a pod in Columbus, Ohio that year as well. And I think I might have gone straight from Dayton to Columbus to cover the first round and second rounds there. I don't really remember, but it's one of those deals. I'm always appreciative that I happen to be in Philadelphia for Florida Gulf Coast, just to witness that.
Yep. One
of the great mid-major stories of our adult lives. And I also happen to be in Dayton for VCU's start of its Final Four run. And I was glad
Cleveland,
that I happened to be there. It was Cleveland. That's exactly right. It was Cleveland. I went from Dayton to Cleveland. That's and now I'm starting to remember how my life has unfolded.
There you go.
I just needed your help. I just needed your help. But it was fun to be there. And just as I was going back last night and reading about it and looking at old videos, it was a fun flashback. And that was the flashback segment, brought to you by Travis Matthew, apparel designed for confidence and comfort, no matter where the day takes you. Appreciate Travis Matthew sending all the stuff. Like, I'm ready to go to the golf course, buddy. Look at me. I mean, I ain't got time.
Me too.
I'd love.
There's definitely no time, but I'm ready. But there is zero time.
Oh, I'm gonna look so good on the golf course. Thanks to Travis Matthew. Appreciate you guys. When we come back, we'll do the final 4-1 presented by FanDuel Sports, but we're going to pick all the first four games and the first game of the actual round of 64. We'll do that right after this break. It's the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. It's time for the final 4-1 presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. If you're a regular listener of the podcast, you know that typically on Fridays I'll pick four games and Orlando will pick the fifth. We do it against the spread. They're called expert picks. They're below 500, but we're trying hard. We want to be good at this. We're working on it. You ready, Norlander? Game one.
This is going to be the fastest final 4-1 ever, GP. Let's go.
St. Francis, Pennsylvania against Alabama State tonight inside Obi Toppin Arena in Dayton. Alabama State -4.5. How you going to act?
You bet it's Obi Toppin Arena. I'm going with some personal bias, some recency bias. While Tony Madlock is rocking a killer Alabama State hat. If you've not seen it, it's awesome. I'm going to go with St. Francis here. Saw him win in the NEC tournament. These are the two lowest rated teams in the field, but I will go with Rob Crimmel's crew to get it done and win. Keep an eye. We're obviously going to pick both of these 16-on-16 matchups. More years than not, these 16-on-16 games, one of them is usually pretty dang dramatic in the final 3, 4, 5 minutes. It may well be this one. I will go with St. Francis to cover, and I'm going to take St. Francis straight up.
If you can go with personal bias, so can I. Tony Madlock, like myself, University of Memphis graduate, played for the Tigers once upon a time. I've known Tony for a long time. So thrilled to finally see him after decades of an assistant coach get a head coaching opportunity. And now he's at Alabama State with his son as his third leading scorer, TJ Matlock, in the NCAA tournament. Awesome stuff. I'll take Alabama State. I'll lay the points. Game two, North Carolina against San Diego State. inside Jalen Crutcher Arena tonight in Dayton. Tar Heels -4.5.
I see what you're doing. So they're gonna switch over. They're gonna take out the nameplates. This is gonna go from Obi Toppin to Jalen Crutcher in a matter of 30 minutes.
Yes, we have 30 minutes, and that's plenty of time.
Gotcha. Okay, just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page there.
Same page.
We talked a ton about this game. This number's too big for me. I will take San Diego State to cover.
I will also take the Aztecs to cover, just because I know where this is going to go. I was just on TV for 2 straight days talking about North Carolina didn't belong in the tournament. If North Carolina wins, a lot of people will try to tell you it proves that they belong in the tournament. It won't be true. Nothing that happens after Selection Sunday has anything to do with what should have happened on Selection Sunday. I hope we know that, but I know we don't. I'm trying to avoid stupidity. Give me San Diego State plus the 4.5. Game 3, first for tomorrow, Mount St. Mary's against American inside Scoochie Smith Arena. It's American -2.5.
I'm going to go American here to win and to cover. Mount St. Mary's, a nice story. Donnie Lynn getting them going just immediately and winning that conference. But I will go with the Eagles to fly. No, I will not be making an eagle noise here on the show. If the Eagles can somehow be a 16-1, winner gets Duke. Winner gets Duke, right? We making eagle noises if the winner here beats the Blue Devils. Not doing that right now. Give me American.
I don't know how to do an eagle impersonation right off the top of my head, but I can learn one. I mean, I learned a peacock impersonation from the ride from the CBS Broadcast Center to my hotel in the middle of the night one night. No problem learning an eagle impersonation. If I need to, I will. Like one team has Matt Rogers and the other team doesn't. What do you want me to do? I'm taking American minus the 2.5 inside Scoochie Smith Arena. Game 4 tomorrow night. Xavier against Texas in the first 4. This one's in Charles Cook Arena. Xavier minus 3.5.
I feel like you're missing a really good flyer here, but that's okay. I will go. Texas has been just so up and down. I'll tell you what. I will take Xavier to win and cover. So give me Xavier over under GP combined points from Trey Johnson and Ryan Conwell. I'm going to set it at 55.5. Conwell and Johnson. You taking the over, the under, and who do you got in the game?
I think I'll go under on that just because I think that's probably statistically the smart thing to do. I'll take Xavier simply because I like to say I told you so sometimes. And I believe Xavier should have been in this tournament. I do not believe Texas should have been in this tournament. I'll take Xavier to win the game. I'll lay the 3.5. Game 5, that's yours. And I know you're going with the first game on Thursday that's going to jump into our television. Creighton and Louisville. We got it at Louisville minus 2.5. I named the arena. It's technically Rupp, but I called it Michael Kidd-Gilchrist Arena.
Okay, this is on, and I named the court. This is on Tayshaun Prince Court. This is the 9/8 first tip, CBS 12:15 Eastern. And as the line stands right now, we've got Xavier. We've got Louisville being the favorite team by 2.5, I believe, GP. I'm going Creighton straight up. This is probably an idiotic pick. Louisville is going to have as much more fans in that building than maybe in the history of that building down there in Lexington. They are misseeded. They're both really good teams. Ryan Kalkbrenner is going to be a big factor. I mentioned Rain Smith will be back for the Cards, but I will take the Jays. That's where you'll find them in my bracket at cbssports.com.
Louisville is underseeded. That's the bad, but gets to play 70 minutes from its home. That's the good. They'll have a home court advantage. I'll take Louisville to win the game and cover that number. Kelsey goes into the round of 32 where you get a presumed second-round matchup against the number 1 overall seed, the Auburn Tigers. The basketball's almost here. Can't wait for it to get tipped off. Appreciate all you guys spending an hour with us. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Terry Teagle's a legend. Hook, Larnell. Once again, thank you guys for watching the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe. We'll talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.